Hello, everyone. Sunday, January 9th. Next in the series of vlog posts, I actually have people when they see me now calling them vlog posts. So the terminology must be making its way around the association, which I like to hear. But we're now back into the midst of basketball season. I do apologize that I missed last week's video. Working for a privately owned membership-based campground and resort organization mixed with New Year's festivities led to some very interesting situations last weekend that required some human resources input. So again, I do apologize for not putting out a video last Sunday, but I thought I'd follow up this week and put something together based on some feedback that I heard prior to the break, and it continued again after the break. Not necessarily negative, but we had, or I've been hearing of a few situations where we've had either some rookie officials, and again, my definition for a rookie official tends to be 3 years or less. I think after that 3 years, what you want to define that official at that point is up to you. But for me, a rookie official is probably 1, 2, 3 years of experience. So whether it be rookie officials or officials that are moving up, maybe to do the JV level when they've only done middle school and freshman, or they're moving up to the varsity level for the first time after only doing freshman and JV in the past. Again, the feedback that I've been hearing is that we are being hypercritical of these officials, and I'm not pointing anyone out specifically. What I'm saying is that in my discussions with some of these officials who are moving up for the first time in their career, they're working with crews, or they're working with someone else, whether it be 2-person or 3-person. It doesn't really make a difference. But I'm hearing that we are being hypercritical in a way that is, I don't know if mean is necessarily the right term, but we're being more inflammatory than we need to be when we're helping our fellow officials improve. And so my thing this week is to just ask everyone to kind of take a step back and think about the interactions that you've had, not just this year, but in the past, with officials who have maybe moved up for the first time, or they're in the middle of their first season and they might be doing their first, second, or third varsity game. Think about the interactions that you've had with those officials, and think about how you, as maybe a veteran official or someone who's worked at that level for 2, 3, 4 years, if you see that other official struggling, or you see that they need help, how have you presented that assistance to them? Has it been, kind and compassionate and understanding, or has it been in their face? Has it been using a lot of forceful, aggressive language, right? The thing that I would ask everyone to remember is that we all need to be leaders when it comes to officiating, because some people in the association are fantastic middle school basketball officials. And when we have new officials to the middle school level, we team them up with those particular officials for one reason. And it's because that those officials who are really good at middle school basketball, who are probably also pretty good at freshman basketball and JV basketball, a good official, there's good officials at different levels, but an official who's good with mechanics and good with judgment and good with rapport for coaches and players, a lot of times that transcends levels. So what you will see a lot of times is younger officials or newer officials being paired up with veteran officials. And my hope is that as we look back on some of the interactions that we've had over the past year or two, that what you remember, especially if we are the senior official on the crew, that we have a responsibility. We really have 2 responsibilities. Number one, we have a responsibility to make sure that that crew makes it through the game, working together as a unit and not fractured and not siloed. Number 2, We want to make sure that officials that are working with us for the first time or at that level for the first time have the type of support that they need. And I don't think anyone minds being told or being offered opinions and recommendations and suggestions to improve. But how are we framing that? How are we talking about that? How are we presenting the information to another official? And I would just ask everyone, I'm going to have some slides here in just a second that talk about leadership and officiating. And I would ask everyone before we get to that point to think back to when you personally started officiating. I do this a lot. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but I do it a lot. I try to remind myself many, many times, especially when I'm working with officials who, are first year, second year, third year, maybe 10th year, but first year working at the varsity level. How did I feel when I first started officiating? How did I feel when I got my first varsity game? How did I feel when I got my first Tri-Valley game? How did I feel when I first had my first Saginaw Valley League game? And I was lucky. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was very lucky. I had when I started 20 years ago, I had some really good mentors, Papa Joe, Kevin Sinicki, Bill Heinskill, Bill Janes, Bruce Moore. It really ran the gamut. And I know I'm missing a lot of officials, Craig Bauer, the entire Bauer family at that particular point was very helpful. So anyway, long story short is I was very lucky. I had a lot of good mentors. And they were all very helpful. They all wanted to see me succeed. They saw that I wanted to get better. They saw that I wanted to improve, and they had a way of going about helping me improve. Now, each one of them presented the information a little bit differently. Some were very straightforward. Some were, asked a lot of questions about why I was calling what I was calling or why I was doing what I was doing. But, I can remember plain as day that I wouldn't be where I'm at right now on a video blog as the director of training for the association. I wouldn't be here without the input of 40 to 50 people who had a very positive influence on me. And, I think about those interactions and, you have 2 or 3 of those interactions that go awry or they don't hit you the right way, or they're hypercritical. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking today as an official. So one of the things that I do a lot of times is I reflect back. How did I feel when I was 18 and I was officiating my first game at Zion Lutheran with Joe Petriga? How did I feel the first time I did a varsity game? How did I feel the first time that I walked into the gym at Essexville Garber and did a Tri-Valley varsity game with Lee Morgan? And I remember specifically it was Lee Morgan. The other official doesn't officiate anymore. How did I feel the first time when I walked in the gym and did my first Saginaw Valley League game? How did those officials probably perceive me, right? What did they think about me? They probably thought I was pretty green and I didn't know what I was doing. And frankly, probably didn't know what I was doing when it came to officiating basketball at that level. But the reality of the situation is that every time I was in that situation, those officials did a very good job of helping me learn, understand, and come out of it better on the other end. So again, as we get ramped back up in the season, and as we work with different crews and different partners, and each partner will have different needs and each partner officiates differently, my ask is that you just remember, you take yourself back to when you started officiating. And when you get ready to give people critiques and give them suggestions and recommendations, please continue to do that. We will not get better if we don't communicate with one another when we see someone doing something that could be detrimental to either the crew or to that official specifically, right? But just think about how you're presenting the information, right? Because I sent out an email earlier this week about the mentorship program. I think that's going to be hugely beneficial. I will tell anyone that listens, our retention rate as an association, as the sport of basketball, as the state of Michigan, retention rates for officials suck. They are terrible. I don't think if you would go back into the archives of the MHSAA, there's never been a time where we've lost more officials over a 5-year period and our retention rate has been this terrible, right? And again, I realize that it's just as much coaches, parents, players. Like, we understand kind of where that falls in the paradigm, and I don't think we should blame just coaches, just parents, just players. We don't need to blame anyone. The reality is that the feedback that especially newer officials or officials that are moving up for the first time, they're getting a lot of different feedback and a lot of different stimulus. They're getting feedback from players, from coaches, from athletic directors, from other officials. We can't control any of those variables except the feedback that they're getting from other officials. So from that perspective, that kind of leads me into a couple of slides here that I have for you. So just bear with me here as I pull this up. So again, what it really breaks down to for me is just constantly reminding myself, where was I at? Where did I come from? How did it feel when I was in this person's situation? What would I have liked to have heard? And I'm not saying it all has to be flowers and roses and that we need to give trophies out every time that someone officiates a good game. But how are we presenting information when we're really trying to help other officials? We shouldn't be badgering other officials. We shouldn't be hypercritical of other officials. We shouldn't be demeaning other officials. That does us no good. It makes us as the demeaning official look like a bad leader. Number one. Number two, it turns away that other official, especially if they're working at that level for the very first time. So as we think about leadership and officiating, think of the officials that you like working with the most. What character traits do they have? Why do you enjoy officiating with them? I brought this up earlier this year. I can't remember if it was a training meeting or a blog post, but it really doesn't matter. This should be questions that we're asking ourselves all the time. What makes a good partner? What when it comes time to take that hour drive to Whittemore Prescott or Roscommon or Tawas, who do we want to be in the car with? Why do we want to be in the car with them? Right? Because we spend a lot more time in the car with our crew when we travel these long distances than we do on the court. And what makes those drives bearable for us? What information, or I should say, what personality traits do those officials have that you really like working with and riding with? And how can you incorporate those into your officiating style, into your leadership? Even if you've only done this for 4 or 5 years, you're still a leader in officiating because we're adding new officials all the time. Now, in a perfect world, we would be retaining all of those officials. But the reality of the situation is we're not. We're retaining a very low number of those officials. And we, as other officials, have to step up. We can't rely on players, coaches, players or coaches or spectators or even the MHSAA. And again, I'm not defaming the MHSAA or coaches or players or whoever. The reality of the situation is when you're in the heat of the moment on the court and everyone's against you, there's one or two other officials who are your only friends on the court at that time. And after the game is over, if you go into the locker room and that one or two other people are just shouting at you and expecting you to be at the top of your game all the time, that's not beneficial. That's part of what leads to low retention rates. So step up, be a better official, be willing to work. Be willing to work with officials who have questions, who need help, who need to improve. Because I can guarantee you a lot of these officials understand that they're not where they need to be. Hell, I understand I'm not where I need to be. There's a lot of things that I need to work on, and I'm trying to work on them constantly. And for me, I have a relationship with a lot of officials now from being in the association for 20 years and working with a lot of the same people over and over again. If they come to me and they get in my face about it, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal, but I've already developed that relationship with them. I've had 10, 15, 20 years of experience with them. I know if they're coming to me, they're getting in my face a little bit about it. It's probably because I messed up pretty bad, or I'm doing something that's making the crew look absolutely terrible. But I can take that because I've been doing this for 20 years. Number one. Number two, I'm the director of training. So if I'm doing something wrong, yeah, it's on me and I got to fix it. But we can't expect other officials to be able to react that same way. So as we're looking at how to build up our leadership skills in officiating, we have to look at some of the key skills that the best officials have. For me, number one is the ability to be humble, to understand that no official is ever going to know everything. I don't care how many years of experience you have. Even the best high school official isn't as good as a college official. The best college official, it can be debated whether the best college official is better than the best NBA official, vice versa. I really don't care. The reality of the situation is even the best official in the world who might be working freshman level basketball in the state of New Mexico, they can improve. They're not perfect. And their expectations of other officials shouldn't be perfection. What they should expect of themselves is to stay humble enough to understand where they came from and how to impart their knowledge on other officials, especially those that are just working at that level for the first time, or they're newer officials. Self-reflection. How well did I officiate that game? How well did I officiate this week? Guys I shouldn't say guys, people give me a hard time all the time when I'm in the car and I'm coming home from games and we're riding together. I'm very quiet in the car. And it's not because I'm an introvert by nature, which I am, but a lot of times that's my self-reflection time, because if I don't think about it on the spot, if I wait until the next morning to think about the game the night before, I'm going to forget so many nuances. I'm going to get so busy at work. I'm going to get phone calls. I'm going to get texts. I'm going to get emails. And the key sticking points to me from the game the night before are going to be washed away very quickly. So it's important for me to self-reflect as quickly as possible after the game is over. That's just what I do. I'm not saying that officials who don't self-reflect after the game or who like to carry conversations in the car are bad officials or mediocre officials. The best officials are able to carry that conversation in the car after the game is over. I just can't, because my mind goes to a lot of other places as soon as I kind of shut myself off from that game. So that's what I have to use. And I have the self-awareness to this last bullet point to understand that my ability to have a good short-term memory as far as what happened in a basketball game and what I need to improve upon. I'm self-aware enough to know that I can't let it go 12 hours and then start thinking about the game the night before. I have to literally give myself probably 2 hours and really drill down and think about what I did right, what I did wrong, and then kind of just put it to bed when I go to sleep that night. And part of that self-reflection also comes with, what are my strong points as an official? What areas am I weak at that could stand improvement? I'll tell you right now, a couple of areas that I know 100% that I need to get better at. Number one, as a lead official, I need to stop going across to the opposite lane line to get fouls that are happening underneath the basket or in the paint. I got to let those go to the sea, right? I've got to get better about not letting my eyes kind of swim outside of my primary coverage area and trust the center official to get those fouls that are happening in their primary coverage area. I'm not good at it. I have never been good at it. I am getting better at it, but it's a very slow process for me. And do I wish I could be getting better at it faster? Hell yeah, I do. Right. But the reality of the situation is that it takes time, and I work on it every game. And I want to have that time after the game is over to self-reflect and say, okay, how did I actually do with it this game? Did it get better than the last game? Did it get worse? And if it got worse, why did it get worse? How can I make it better? How can I do better the next game? But I will tell you what isn't advantageous. What isn't advantageous is after the game is over, when that center official who I've called maybe 2 or 3 plays on their lane line as fouls, I'd much rather have an official come to me and say, Tom, what did you see on those particular plays that you thought I didn't see, that you felt you needed to blow your whistle? Not, how dare you come across the paint and blow something in my primary coverage area. That makes us look terrible as officials. It makes us look terrible as a crew. You put me in a bad spot with a coach. That's not helpful. Okay. That is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to bring up the next slide here. Providing feedback to fellow officials. I think of this on a continuum, and I would really ask that all officials try to put this continuum in their mind. Okay, on one end of the continuum, you have when you're talking about providing feedback to fellow officials, you have no tact, demeaning, hypercritical. I just put Bobby Knight here because I think that's a personality that we're all familiar with, especially those of us who officiate basketball. But when you're dealing with another official, if you're not doing it tactfully, if you're doing it in a demeaning, hypercritical way, that other official is going to shut down. I have an example here coming up in a couple minutes that I'll kind of take you through my own experience, right? The other end of the continuum is saying nothing and not addressing gaps and weak points and just letting it go. That's not helpful either. Just saying, oh, yeah, it was a good game. How helpful is that? You're doing a disservice to another official who is probably looking to you for feedback. Now, if you did a really good game and everything went well, tell them everything went well, or pick out one or two plays that you really liked about what that official did in that game. Tell them what you liked. Tell them what you did well. Reinforce. If something didn't go well during the game, don't get in their face and be someone who doesn't deal with those situations without tact. Okay. Now, in a perfect world, again, the middle of the continuum is the optimal world, being straightforward and congenial with your critiques. Again, showing patience, showing a willingness to be helpful. Okay, Tom, I saw that you passed on a travel that it was pretty evident. Was that something you missed? Did you see something else there? Because it was pretty evident to me, but let's talk about why you passed on that travel. I give my answer, and then if it becomes apparent that I missed something with that travel, tell me what I missed, but do it in a way that's congenial and straightforward. Okay. I know a lot of people are probably listening to this and saying, well, I get my point across very well when I'm just straightforward, black and white, practical. Okay. I understand that. That's people's personalities. But please remember two things. Number one, officials are just as responsible for everyone else for officials' retention rates. I am just as responsible for retaining our new officials as coaches, players, spectators, the state of Michigan. Everyone has an equal part in retaining officials. And if I'm not doing my part, okay, we don't retain those officials. And I feel like I did a disservice because of how I addressed that official. The players, the spectators, the state, whatever, I have to look in a mirror at that point and say, you know what, I didn't do right by this official because they needed help. They needed guidance. What they didn't need is someone getting in their face and providing inflammatory language that just made the other official shut down. So please, what I ask is, I'm not saying don't be critical, but what I am saying is think about what it felt like when you were in that situation previously. How would you have responded to that type of feedback? Number one. And number two, how does the person sitting in front of you, what is their personality? Okay. What does their personality seem to be most accepting of? And for our younger officials that are probably going through these situations right now and listening and learning and getting this feedback, remember what this feels like right now, because in 5 years, you're going to be in the position that someone like myself is in, where you're advising and being responsible for retention and training. Okay. Remember what it felt like so that you can impart your knowledge and your expertise accordingly. Okay. And doing it in the right way. Providing feedback to yourself. Again, another continuum here. On the one end, it's very hypercritical of yourself. I suck. I'm terrible. I'm never going to get any better. There's a reason that coaches and spectators are always yelling at me. I've heard officials this year alone say this, and it's sad. And I wish I was better at providing the right feedback and words to say, It's not as bad as you think you are, right? For me, I know that this is another area of weakness for me, because for me, I'm not as bad as the left side of this continuum, but I'm sure as hell not in the middle. I'm probably on this furthest left black line, because I am hypercritical of myself. I pick myself apart way too much. And a lot of times it's not bad to be critical of yourself, but what happens to me is paralysis by analysis. I do so much analysis that I take 8 to 10 different things with me into a game that I want to work on, that I feel that I'm not good at. And what that does is I never get better at, I get slightly better at those 8 things, but I never improve significantly at each of those things individually. So I'm working to get better at getting into the middle of this continuum, where I've improved in both A and B so far this season. I'm feeling more confident in my abilities. There are still areas that I need to get better at. Again, self-awareness, self-reflection. And then you have, the other end of the spectrum. And I hope no one actually thinks this. It's like I said in an earlier vlog post, no official is as good as they actually think they are. And that goes for every official that ever walked the face of the earth. But I hope no one in our association actually thinks I'm a top 5 official. I've done 20 district finals and 3 regional finals, and I got a quarterfinal. Other officials are privileged to work with me. If that is your mindset, okay, and you take umbrage at my vlog post asking you to change that mindset, I'm willing to hear your feedback, and I'm willing to have a conversation, because I really hope no one feels this way, that they're kind of above other officials, because that's not helpful. That's not positive. I'm not saying you shouldn't be confident in your skills as an official, because you have to show confidence when you're out there on the court. But at the same time, that confidence, if you're hyper confident, that translates over into how you present yourself to your other officials, whether it be just how you walk on the court or how you talk to those officials when you're giving out critiques in the locker room. Okay, so be confident in who you are as an official and your skill sets, but don't be overconfident to the point where you just give off this air of cockiness that no one wants to work with. Okay. My last bullet point here: the best officials are those that show consistent improvement while the season is being played, during the off season when no one else is watching. Okay. I'm going to give you a couple personal examples here. This happened to me early on in the season. Okay. I was working with 2 officials who I have worked with before, but very infrequently. Okay. And it was on a pretty big game. And when I walked into the locker room, I drove by myself. I walked in the locker room, and the first thing that I heard from one of the other 2 officials that I was on the crew with was, "This is probably going to be a big step up from any of the games that you do in your area." That made me feel pretty small. And, again, if I'm the type of person, going back to this other continuum, if I'm the type of person who's on the left side of this continuum with no tact, and that's demeaning, I would have snapped back in a minute. Okay. But my ability to be self-aware made me understand that we hadn't even worked the game yet. Okay, so there's 2 things here. Number one, if I don't take the higher road, our crew is going to suffer for the next 2 hours in that game. Number one. Number two, what do I benefit by clapping back at someone when they say, this is and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was basically, this game is above anything that you typically see in your area. Okay. I'm a 20-year official. I've been called every name in the book. That made me feel under a foot tall. It made me feel absolutely terrible. What it did do is it made me put a chip on my shoulder, for the rest of that game. And I wanted to show those two officials that I knew what I was doing. I was more than capable of holding my own. But the reality of the situation is I shouldn't have had to feel like that. I shouldn't have had to put a chip on my shoulder. Chip on my shoulder should have came from working a pretty good game with two really good teams and having the opportunity to do that game, not walking into the locker room and feeling like I was the third wheel who, if he took one misstep, was going to throw the game completely off course and make the crew look terrible. Please don't ever put anyone in that position. Okay. I don't care where they're coming from. I don't care if they work in the Upper Peninsula, the Lower Peninsula, Muskegon, Grand Rapids, Detroit, Alpena, Marquette, Sault Ste. Marie, whatever. Okay. Don't ever make them feel like they're stepping into a situation that you think they can't handle. That does nothing for you as a crew. And it makes that other official feel absolutely terrible. They might snap back at you. They might get mad at you, but I guarantee in the back of their mind, you are now making them question themselves. Never do that. Please never make another official feel like that. It's a terrible feeling. Okay. The other thing that the other personal situation, and I apologize if I know I bring up a lot of personal stories here, but I think I bring up a lot of personal stories because they've happened to me specifically, and I don't want to talk about stories from other officials because, number one, I don't have their permission. Number two, it's just easier for me to reflect on my own stories. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was doing my first semifinal. It was a boys semifinal. It was at the Breslin. I was pretty amped up for the game. Obviously, anytime, you get a semifinal or a final, it's a pretty big deal, especially when you get to work at the Breslin or at Calvin College or, Mount Pleasant or wherever, when they used to hold them at Rose Arena at CMU. Anyway, long story short, this was my first semifinal game. I was working with two veteran guys, not from this area. They were from other areas of the state. Both of them had done college basketball. So we had a play that I've diagrammed here where we were in transition going left to right. We had a one-on-one where, again, it was kind of a breakout. It was one ball handler, one defender. The defender fouled the ball handler right where I've got the orange circle here in this diagram. Okay. And obviously it happened relatively right in front of the lead official. Okay. But I called it because I thought the lead official was screened out based on the ball handler's positioning. And what I perceived was the lead official's inability to see the defender hooking the arm of the ball handler as he was trying to make a move to the basket. Okay. Now, was I proud of myself that I didn't just let it go because it was in the lead's area? Yeah. I don't want to say I regretted it immediately, but I did start questioning myself immediately. Okay. Now, the game went on. Nothing was really said. I tried to eliminate it from my mind. And I tried to tell myself, the lead didn't have a whistle on it. It was right in front of him. But from my vantage point, from my perspective, what I saw was the ball handler not being able to make the move that he wanted to make because the defender basically had him hooked by the arm. Okay. Game gets over. We go in the locker room. And again, this is a semifinal at the Breslin. And I got verbally dressed down for at least 10 good minutes by this lead official. Okay. There was no questioning, what did you see? What did you think I missed? Why did you call what you called? It was calling me 4-letter expletives, telling me that if I ever expected to work at the Breslin, another game, I was going to stop the way that I was currently officiating because it was making the crew look like they didn't know what they were doing. And it was 10 good minutes of me just hearing it over and over and over and over again about this one play and about how terrible it made us look as a crew. Okay. That was the closest I've ever come to giving up officiating. And at that point, I was 15 years in, and thankfully it was the last game of the season, because it took me 6 good months to get my officiating emotion to a place where I wanted to officiate again. Because if there would have been a new season starting a month later, I wouldn't have done it. It was such a bad experience. It crushed my motivation and it crushed my emotion. And if you want to call me soft, that's fine, but that's just the way that particular situation hits me. I think we as human beings, as adult human beings, we should be above that. We should never call other officials names, tell them that they're not adequately equipped to work at the level that they're working. You can think whatever you want to think. I'm not trying to mind control people here. Okay. But think about how you're presenting yourself to other people, because one word can change that other official's entire career, their motivation, their willingness to continue to do this. And here's the thing. We've lost 85 officials in the last 2 years. We have zero room for error right now. Zero room for error. Okay. So I ask all of this, and I know this is, much less lighthearted than I typically like to keep these vlogs. But I've been hearing some feedback that this is happening, and I just ask that we be, again, going back to this continuum, be straightforward, but be congenial. Be patient, be willing to help. Understand that, if you're a veteran official and you've done the big games, not everyone's at that level. And the reason, that we're relying on you as that veteran official. We're relying on you to help us retain officials that are moving up, that want to work at the levels that you've been working at for years. Help them. Don't demean them. Don't be hypercritical. Help them, because everyone was in that place at one time. And we can't ever forget that. 20, 30, 40 years of officiating doesn't erase the fact that we were all new at one point. And we all have to remember what that felt like, so that we don't put other officials in that situation if we had such a bad time coming up in officiating. Okay. So please be good leaders. Here's to another good week of successful officiating. Again, I appreciate everyone that has been patient with my emails. I'm not sure what exactly is going on with Hotmail, but I've sunset that account. I know some of you are probably still getting emails from that account that I sent 2 or 3 weeks ago, but that is why that email no longer exists. So hopefully everything gets figured out from there. If you have any comments, questions, you can always reach out to me, tombarnacle1984@gmail.com now. And I promise that I will be back next week with another blog post that hopefully is a little bit more lighthearted. Again, thank you to everyone for the work that you have done so far this year, that you continue to do. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, down 85 officials from 2019. We need everyone. If you can kind of help us continue to retain these newer and these younger officials, anything that you can do to help in that regard, we very much appreciate. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Best of luck this coming week, and I will see you back here next Sunday. Take care.